Good evening to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook video for today, August 19th, 2025, the second video for today. And we're going to go over the latest on Hurricane Erin, which is churning away just east of the Bahamas. But we're also going to take a look at the rest of the tropics this afternoon because there is a lot to go over besides Erin. So let's get started with the National Hurricane Center homepage. The latest on Hurricane Erin right now. Maximum sustained winds at 105 miles per hour with a minimum central pressure of 958 millibars. And this is located at 26.6 north. And this is holding steady. I'll show you the satellite imagery in a little bit. It's doing a little bit better today than it was, or it's doing a little bit better this afternoon, I should say, than it was this morning. Maybe it's trying to slowly regain itself. And this is still going to be a hurricane by the time it passes just to the east of North Carolina, in which impacts are expected. As I went over this morning, tropical storm warnings are in effect. In fact, let me show you the cone of the forecast right now for Hurricane Erin. Again, expected to move east of the Carolinas and out to sea, but we already talked about this, that its wind field is going to be large enough that we will see tropical storm impacts along the outer banks of the Carolinas and even into portions of the Delmarva as well, for southern Virginia and even coastal eastern Virginia as well. And there's also a tropical storm watch in effect for Bermuda now. And you're saying, my God, this storm is going to be that huge that the tropical storm force wind field might affect Bermuda. Well, yes, it will be. And just you watch over the next several days, especially as this begins to intensify, especially with the help of the jet stream energy. This is going to explode even further than it already has in its size, especially in its wind field. And we're going to get quite a bit of tropical storm conditions here along the outer banks of the Carolinas, and we might once again even get impacts from Bermuda too. Can you really hard to believe, isn't it? But I'll read you out the current tropical storm watches and warnings as of 5 p.m. because obviously they have been updated. A storm surge warning, and this is actually the first thing that they mention. And a good thing that they mention as the first thing, storm surge warning in effect for Cape Lookout to Duck, North Carolina, because there will be storm surge with this. There will be beach erosion, very high waves, and storm surge, even as this will pass offshore. And obviously, as I mentioned before, storm surge is a impact from a tropical storm that you cannot, or a tropical cyclone in general, that you cannot throw away. We're not looking at 15 to 20 feet life-killing storm surge or life-ending storm surge like we would see in, major big-time hurricane landfalls, but there will still be storm surge, and it's enough that we have a storm surge warning in effect. And of course, tropical storm warning in effect from Beaufort Inlet, North Carolina to Duck, North Carolina, including the Pamlico and Abel Marley Sounds. I think that's how you say Abel Marley Sounds. Not sure how, a little bit iffy with the pronunciation, but I'm pretty sure. For those from Abel Marley know what the actual pronunciation is. Whatever. You get the point. Tropical storms warnings in effect for North Carolina. And then we also have a tropical storm watch in effect from north of Duck, North Carolina to Chincoteague, Virginia. So tropical storm watches in effect for Virginia as well, and Bermuda. And the tropical storm watches and warnings that we had in effect for Bermuda, we have a tropical storm watch in effect for Bermuda, but we had tropical storm watches and warnings in effect for some of the Bahamas earlier today. Looks like those have been since canceled, so in the Bahamas you won't have to worry any longer about direct impacts from Hurricane Erin going forward. But the main focus now will be especially off the coastal North Carolina. And just to sum it all up for you in key messages, Erin is expected to produce life-threatening surf and rip currents along the beaches of the Bahamas, much of the east coast of the U.S. And that's another thing, too, I should actually really quickly mention is rip currents will also be a huge risk. And this is going to be because of high waves that'll be produced by Erin. That'll be felt not just along the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which will probably result in storm surge, but all up along the entire East Coast, all the way from South Florida up into New England and the Northeast. There is a high risk for rip currents right now. Um, and as I mentioned earlier this morning, in Wrightsville Beach alone yesterday in North Carolina, there were 50 rip current rescues and probably even more. So rip currents are a huge issue. They are very dangerous. They can take people's lives. They have taken people's lives. So please be careful as you're hitting the shores over this upcoming week. Um, because Erin will be out there churning the waters and bringing very high waves. And obviously, that'll manifest the most in coastal North Carolina, where we do have tropical storm warnings in effect and obviously storm surge warnings in effect. And the National Hurricane Center even says it here in its key messages. Beachgoers in those areas should follow advice from lifeguards, local authorities, and beach warning flags. They have the rip current risk flags at the beach. Please pay attention to those. Storm surge flooding and tropical storm conditions are expected in the North Carolina Outer Banks beginning late Wednesday or Wednesday night, where tropical storm and storm surge warnings are in effect. The storm surge will be accompanied by large waves leading to significant beach erosion, overwash, making some roads impassable, and obviously that is a nuisance to human life and would also throw in the potential for some sort of flooding that could lead to some property damage, especially to people who might have homes along the Outer Banks. So please keep that in mind as well. And tropical storm conditions are possible in Bermuda on Thursday and Friday, where a tropical storm watch is now in effect. So Bermuda, as we head into the end of the week, you might want to keep an eye out on Erin, as Erin will probably also pass away from Bermuda, but again, the wind field of the storm will be so large that we're probably going to get tropical storm force winds even there. And then interest along the U.S. Mid-Atlantic and southern New England coasts should also monitor the progress of Erin, as strong winds are possible Thursday and Friday too, because this storm is just going to grow into a massive behemoth of a tropical system as it moves off to the north and northeast later this week. And I'll show you the models on that in a little bit. But really quickly, before we get back to the models and, want to end it out, I do want to talk about the rest of the tropics because there is more happening than just Erin. We have two other areas of interest, and let me actually really quickly bring you back to the National Hurricane Center homepage. An area of interest here in the Central Atlantic. We talked about this a little bit. 60% chance of development in the next 7 days, but only a 10% chance in the next 48 hours. This is part of a very broad monsoonal wave that's here in the Central Atlantic, as you could very, very clearly see on the satellite. And I should also mention, you could also see Hurricane Erin as well, which producing quite a bit of convection this afternoon, so it's trying to rebound and regain its core. And maybe we'll see a little bit of strengthening occur over the next several days as it approaches the Carolina coast, and then especially as it grows significantly. But here in the Central Atlantic, very, very broad monsoonal wave. And we're probably not going to see any develop immediately within the next few days, but once we get towards the next week, especially as this heads into the Western Atlantic, things could be more favorable for it, and we might see some development occur out of this. And then we have 99L, which is right off the eastern coast, or the western coast of Africa, in the far eastern Atlantic. And this is one interesting system, I got to tell you. Definitely has quite the potent circulation this afternoon, and it's also producing quite a bit of convective activity. And I'll bring you to the 850 millibar vorticity. And there's definitely a pretty aggressive vorticity signature with it. And as I mentioned earlier, I think I've even mentioned earlier today that quite a bit of people are talking about whether or not this might actually become a tropical depression. It might, although none of the models are really picking up on it for some reason. But just bringing you back to the satellite imagery here. Definitely producing a lot of convection this afternoon, and this definitely has some low-level spin with it. So maybe if this is able to hold on, maybe this will be a quick spin up and be a surprise tropical depression, maybe even snag the next named storm on the list really quickly, which will be Ferdinand. And then we're going to have to watch over the next week because, once again, we got a lot of things to watch. It's August 19th. We are just starting to get into the peak of the hurricane season. And let me now show you that with the European. Obviously, we have Erin, though, to track, which is the main event for right now. And that'll pass just to the east of North Carolina, obviously bringing tropical storm winds and beach erosion and very, very high waves. I showed you the GFS earlier today. If you go to earlier today's video, waves as high as 40, 50, even 60 feet out in the Atlantic will be produced as a result of Erin. This storm is going to be really huge and just going to use a lot of energy, and that always produces very high waves. And then that's going to move off into the northeastern Atlantic and will be out of our hair, at least out of our hair, in terms of direct tropical impacts for the East Coast, probably as we get into Saturday. And then eventually you see here, as we head into the end of the week, our area of interest in the central MDR begins to come into frame. The European develops this a little bit, although keeps us out to sea. I guess the high pressure is still not strong enough or not able to build back to the west enough to guide this storm to the west. But you never know. The high pressure is, been trending stronger, and we've even seen that with Erin. Well, for a few days, we've seen just massive shifts to the south and west with Erin's track, with pretty much all of the models. So who's not to say that we could see the high pressure trend stronger and this system here in the western Atlantic ends up trending to the west. And if it does, it'll definitely find itself in very, very warm sea surface temperature anomalies. Even as Erin is kind of leaving its trails behind. Well, I will say for one thing, most of the trails of cooler sea surface temperature anomalies or upwelling that we typically get from tropical systems, most of it will probably be left behind east of the Bahamas. So right here in the southwestern Atlantic, and you could already start to see there is a chunk of sea surface temperature anomalies here that are not as warm thanks to Erin. And that's probably going to expand over the next several days and especially be very prominent here off the East Coast. And it's also going to take quite a bit of warmth away, especially from these waters here off the northeast and Atlantic Canada, in the northwestern Atlantic. And that might also be interesting to maybe help focus a little bit more of the warm sea surface temperature anomalies here in the deep tropics. And that'll be also something we need to watch very closely as we head into the next few weeks, as we're now beginning to get into the heart of the hurricane season. But beyond that, in the western Atlantic and especially in the deep tropics, very, very warm sea surface temperature anomalies all throughout the MDR, Caribbean, and especially into the Gulf of Mexico. Boy, I tell you that the Gulf of Mexico is one boiling pot, and it's a boiling pot that is about to overflow at any moment. And we're going to have to watch the tropics very closely over the next several weeks here. Obviously going to be very, very occupied with Erin for the next few days, but we have other areas that are now beginning to churn off in the Atlantic. And as I've said before, and as I've been saying, this is just the beginning of what will probably be a very active peak season to come in the next few weeks. With that being said, though, that's going to do it for this update. I'm probably going to have another update later tonight at around 11 o'clock or so on Erin, if I'm up at that time, because I was going to do one late last night, but I ended up falling asleep. So it all depends on if I'm going to be up at 11 o'clock. If I am, more than likely I will post another update tonight on Erin, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Until then, enjoy the rest of your evening. Peace, love, and kindness to you all, and I'll be back with more later.